Well, good morning.
Good morning.
You got your Bible, you can turn it to Proverbs chapter 31. So, I couldn't imagine spending, at least, doing a series on Proverbs without spending at least a little bit of time on what has to be one of the most famous passages from Proverbs. And, well, you had to know this was coming when you started the series on the book of Proverbs. Otherwise, you definitely found that out when I handed out my little survey a while back. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about Proverbs chapter 31, not starting in verse 1. We're going to start in verse 10. And what we got here is a poem. It's a poem, a passage that the wise men, the sages of Israel, saved until the very end. So let's do it. Let's read it. Proverbs chapter 31, starting in verse 10. A woman or wife, in the original language, it could be translated either way. So a woman or wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it's still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it, and out of her earnings she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. I don't know that picture. I don't know what that is. That's what that means. She opens her arms to the poor. I got that one. And extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes a seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, he says, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Wow. I'm exhausted. That passage leaves me exhausted, and all I did was read it. But can I say, wow? Man, what a woman. She does it all. She does all of it. She does the shopping. She provides the food. She buys land. She plants crops. She sows. She gets up early in the morning, and she works late into the night. She takes care of everyone in the family and the extended household. She also takes care of the poor. She takes care of those who are in need, and while she's not doing that, while she's not taking care of everybody, she's out there, and she's got a little business on the side. She's buying and selling fine garments. It's unreal. Her children wake up in a blessed mood, and how can they not? Her husband is in the public square. Well, he's there, and he's praising her there as well. And he should be. Because from the sounds of it, as you're reading through this, it's her work ethic that affords him the time to spend his time down there hanging out at the city gates and shooting the bull with his cronies. I mean, it's like we read this in Proverbs and it's unbelievable. As we have seen in other places in Proverbs, this passage, as well as many others, is from a male's perspective. And this woman is, in this poem here, is honored specifically because she makes it possible for her husband to live this unbelievably blessed life. That's what frames this, at least initially. It's a husband praising a woman who makes his life so much easier. Now, the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. And we read Proverbs because we believe that we can gain God's wisdom from reading this, from reading God's word in Proverbs is wisdom. So what wisdom is this poem at the end of Proverbs? What wisdom is it imparting to us? What's this little poem trying to teach us? Well, I think obviously, the most obvious is it's acknowledging what every wise man in the world already knows. And that is that our lives as men are blessed. Our lives are blessed and sustained, just, held together by strong, capable women. Either your mother when you were growing up or your wives when we were married. So on behalf of all the men in the room and all the men everywhere really, just let me simply say, we could not make it without you. And of course all the men in the room said, okay, yeah, I wasn't setting you up for anything here. This is not bad. I think we could have done better than that. Okay, so all the men said, Amen. Amen, right. I mean, we couldn't do it without you, really. We'd be in a sad state. And it's kind of like this. I love this old story of an older couple. They've been married for about 50 years, and they're sitting on the front porch of their house there, and the wife starts talking to their husband of 50 years, and the wife says, go inside and put a sweater on. So he goes in, and he comes back out and sits down next to her and sits next to his wife, and he says, was I cold, or are we going somewhere? I mean, that's how it works, right? I mean, and there's a reason why so many preachers, they dust off this little poem and they read it and preach from it on Mother's Day. Because it is a celebration of all the many different things that strong, capable women, the noble women, that they do to make the world go round. But it's more than just a general collection of wisdom about, talking about women. It does seem that what this poem is doing on a slightly deeper level is it's telling young men what kind of a woman to marry. Remember, when we started out, remember the target audience of Proverbs is to a young man. And we learned that from the very first chapters of Proverbs. You learn that again at the beginning of chapter 31, where it's an older person, a father or a mother, who's making a series, and normally, through most of Proverbs, it's the father making a series of speeches to his son. He's imparting wisdom to him. He's giving instructions that he needs so that he can navigate through life and he can make wise decisions as he does so. And I showed you we looked at last week, that the father spends a lot of time in those first 9 chapters of Proverbs talking to his young son about women. And one theme that he's always telling his son to do is he says, be careful. Be very careful of certain kinds of women. Avoid certain kinds of women. Avoid certain parts of town even where the certain kinds of women are so that you can avoid sexual immorality. And there is that kind of wisdom that we talked about last week from Proverbs. And if you're reading through Proverbs and you're looking at this and you're not a young man and you're not in need of that kind of advice, then you kind of got to flip it. You got to apply the wisdom, but you can apply it to a young woman. But and if you're not in that situation, if you're not a young man or you're not a young woman, you're not in need of that kind of advice, that doesn't apply to you, then you have to read and look at what it says for, kind of mine it for a deeper level of universal wisdom that you can apply to all kinds of different situations. Because that's what you have in Proverbs. There's these levels of wisdom to be found in what the father says to his son. And one of the most important things that this father passes on to his son is that one of the most important lessons he passes on to his son is how his son should think about, how his son should decide what kind of woman he should spend his life with. In Proverbs chapter 5, the father warns his son there about committing adultery. He says, that could get you killed. But then he gives him a positive vision of, what the relationship with a woman, with, his wife-to-be, he says, could be like. He says, don't commit adultery. Instead, he says, enjoy the wife of your youth. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time reading that passage this morning because there are children in the room, but trust me, go back and read that one. It's a good one, and read it on your own. Then later on, in chapter 12, we have more wisdom. We have this wisdom. It seems to preview there in chapter 12 what's to come in chapter 31. So in Proverbs 12, starting in verse 4, it says, a wife of noble character is her husband's crown. Again, it's a male speaking here. We have a male perspective. He says it's good to have a good wife. But a disgraceful wife is like decay to his bones. You can see the father sitting the son down and says, choose wisely. And you just keep telling that over and over again. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 1. It says, the wise woman built her house. I mean, you thought it was the wise man, didn't you? But, it's the wise woman who builds her house. But with her own hands, the foolish woman tears hers down. This seems just to be a quick little preview here of what's to come in Proverbs 31. That this poem in chapter 31 is going to give us a longer look at what it means for a wise woman to build her house. So, on some level, when we read this poem, it's an ideal description of the kind of woman a young man should aspire to marry. And the form of this poem is idyllic. It's actually an acrostic, if you know what that is. In the original language, every line of this poem begins with the next or the successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's done with great intentionality. Imagine you have a poem made in the same form in the English language. And, one letter, one line of the poem for every letter of the alphabet. So, first line, it begins with A. The second line begins with B, and that's just how it works. So if we have a woman of noble character, who can find? B, beautiful is she in the eyes of her man. C, because she not only brings home the bacon, but she fries it up in a pan. We can just keep going with that. D, and you see the way it works. And that's the way it is there. That's what's happening in the original language, and it doesn't translate well. So we totally miss it. But if it was there, if that was so obvious, I think it would make a point. This is an ancient Hebrew literary form here, signifying perfection or completion. The very nature, when the original readers read this, the very nature of this poem says that this is a perfect poem. And it's written for the perfect woman. And, the gist of the poem here seems to be for this son or this young man, it seemed to be saying, son, if you can find a woman like this, if you can find a woman who can do all of these things, if you can find a woman like this, just let her build her house around you. Let her build her house with you in it. Not around you, but, with you there in her midst. Because you will be blessed. If you do that, your life will go good for you. And you will be happy and live happily ever after. It does sound a bit like a fairy tale, doesn't it? Or is it actually more of a nightmare when you read it? It has been clearly brought to my attention that not every woman hears this poem out of Proverbs chapter 31 as good news. That sometimes when this poem is read in church and read in the assembly, or it's preached from in sermons, rather than leaving honored, feeling built up and honored and inspired and encouraged, some women leave feeling guilty and overwhelmed and discouraged. Because they don't feel like they could possibly live up to this description here, this poem. But when they hear it, it's not good news. It's a major bummer. If you disagree with me in this insight of how some women hear this poem, don't complain to me. Just take it up with the other women in your church. You don't know who says this, but just take it up with them. Because weeks ago, I handed out that little survey, that little feedback flyer in Proverbs 31, and I learned it can be a burden. It's a lot to ask. But while I'm at it, let me say, I think this is a good time to say this. To the young men who are growing up, who are going to, just put this in your little stack of wisdom there for later. It's probably not a good idea to pull this poem out and read it like every day forever, and make that your list. Don't take it too seriously. It's not a checklist. It's not. It can be setting you up for some major disappointment in life. You could read this in your Bible, and you should. You could read this and say, this is the kind of woman I'm supposed to marry. I'm supposed to marry a woman that doesn't exist. Well, actually she does. But she's already married to me, so, I'm sorry about that. There's only one, and that's, what else am I supposed to say in that situation, right? Okay, so, to all of us guys who are married, please, let me give you another piece of information, a little bit of wisdom. Don't go home today, or ever. Don't ever read this poem out loud to your wife with the goal of transitioning your marriage from I do to you better. Just saying. That could get you killed too. There is more than one way to die in Proverbs reading this. So. It's bad stuff. What was originally intended to be just this epic, heroic, idealistic, celebration of what a strong, capable woman can do, that has become, for many, it seems, it's become a source of discouragement for women. And it's even become a source of discouragement for men. Maybe that's why some men in ancient Israel had more than one wife. That's the only way they could check all the boxes, Number one, you do the real estate. Number two, you're in charge of food. And number three, you're going to make all the clothes. I had an idea that joke wouldn't go over so well. Maybe it's just polygamy isn't that funny anymore. I don't know. We used to be able to joke about it at the church, but not even. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, so moving on. Maybe it's more likely that this poem was never intended to be taken seriously. It was never intended to be literal. It wasn't meant to be taken literally because it's obviously an overly romanticized, unrealistic, idealistic description of what women and wives and mothers are called to be. And not just in our culture, but in any culture ever, including the original culture in which this was written. Think about the culture in which this was written. One scholar argues that it was likely never, you never found a woman in ancient Israel that had the freedom and the opportunity to do everything that this woman in the poem does. Even if she was just very wealthy, she would have never been able to do all of these things. And go through the list. Go through the verses again. Of course not. It's not realistic. But maybe one of the reasons we don't hear this as good news, maybe one of the reasons that this has become a burden to so many women, maybe one of the reasons we misread this poem is because we're applying it to the wrong woman. Maybe there's more going on in this poem than just informing a young man of the ideal wife. maybe upon closer reading, there's more going on in this poem than meets the eye in a casual reading. There's wisdom here for all of us. It's just waiting for us to find it. But we're going to have to dig for it. Because it's found on a much deeper, more profound level. Because, well, maybe this poem has been saved to the very end of the collection of Proverbs. It's at the very end of Proverbs because it reinforces the main idea of Proverbs. It reinforces the main idea that we've been hearing all along. You notice at the very beginning of the poem, it talks about the woman of noble character. It says that she's more precious than rubies. She's worth way more than anything else in the world. I mean, gold? No, she's worth more than gold. Diamonds? Worth more than diamonds. And if you're paying attention, as we've been reading through Proverbs, we remember that exact same description was applied to Lady Wisdom. It was applied to the personification of wisdom herself. Lady Wisdom. We read about her in the early chapters of Proverbs. In chapter 3, chapters 3 and 8, but else, especially chapter 3 here, a wife of noble character is worth far more than rubies. And speaking of Lady Wisdom, she is more precious than rubies. Nothing can compare to her. Nothing you desire can compare. I mean, we read chapter 31, and I wonder who this poem is about, right? At the very end of the poem, it says that this woman is, she fears the Lord. Remember at the beginning of Proverbs, we're told that the fear of the Lord is, this awe, this great respect for the Lord is the beginning, or it's the essence of wisdom. You can't have wisdom without the fear of the Lord. And this woman in chapter 31, she embodies the fear of the Lord. This woman, she embodies wisdom. And maybe when we read this poem, and we can consider all of the industrious things that this woman does, and the way that she miraculously gets it all done without any sleep, maybe as we're reading it, instead of reading it and saying, that's just so unrealistic. Maybe we're meant to read this acrostic poem, and we're supposed to say, you know what? That's an example of wisdom. It's just obvious. It's right there. I mean, that's the personification of wisdom. I mean, this kind of life is what wisdom looks like. Because this woman, she's no fool. She's not a hothead. She's not a big mouth. She's certainly no sluggard. I mean, she is the opposite of all of those different kinds of fools that are described in Proverbs. And instead, she's the kind of person that Proverbs says God's wisdom will make out of all of us. If we listen to it, and we follow it, and we obey it. This woman isn't some lucky guy's wife. This woman is none other than Lady Wisdom herself. Showing up one last time at the end of Proverbs to make sure that we totally get the message. Remember back in Proverbs chapter 9, what did Lady Wisdom do? She invited us to come to her house, to come home with us, come home with her, all of us to do that. She says, come home and eat at my table. And we were given a choice at that point in chapter 9. You can go home with Lady Wisdom, or you can go home with Miss Folly. You can follow the path of wisdom, or you can follow the path of foolishness. And we got the warning. If you chose to go home with and spend time with and choose to eat with the wrong kind of woman, it will ruin your life. It will be bad. So choose wisely. And choose thoughtfully and carefully. And this woman in Proverbs chapter 31 is actually Lady Wisdom, and I believe there's plenty of good reason to believe that she is, then she's showing up one last time in Proverbs so that we can hear it one last time. I mean, she's there at the beginning, and then she's there all the way through Proverbs. We get the message one last time. And the message is, life is good. Life is real good when you live in Lady Wisdom's house. It's so good to spend time with Lady Wisdom. It's so good to be Lady Wisdom's companion, to be her friend. It's good to be the son or the daughter of Lady Wisdom. You'll be blessed when she builds her house with you in it. This poem isn't telling us that in order to live a good life, you need to go out and get married and find the perfect mate. You got to go find the perfect spouse, the perfect wife, or the perfect husband if you flip it. It's a blessing to find a compatible spouse, somebody that we're married to, that has working for the Lord and going in the same direction. And those of us who are married, we know it's a blessing. We acknowledge it's a blessing. But there are other ways to be blessed. You don't have to be married to be blessed. You don't have to find just the right person to be happy. This poem, it points beyond marriage. I mean, as Jesus and Paul do in the New Testament, they show us that you don't have to be married to be good. You don't have to be married to be blessed, to live a pleasing life to God. What this poem is saying to all of us, young and old, married, not married, rich, poor, it's saying that when you make God's wisdom the number one priority in your life, when you make it it's that one thing, don't miss that one thing, that you will realize that it's more valuable than all the rubies in the world. When you make it that number one priority in your life, you will not be sorry. Because Lady Wisdom is going to take care of you. She does. So here we are. Proverbs 31. At the end of the book of Proverbs. And we're given one last chance to listen. One last chance. And if you've made it this far, and you're still putting it off, you're like, God's wisdom, I'm going to do my way, God's way, foolishness, wisdom, I don't know what I want to do. If you haven't committed your life, so that your life is now shaped and formed and guided by God's wisdom, there is one last, undeniable, irresistible, clear description of what life in Lady Wisdom's house is like. And this is it. This is what it means, Proverbs 31, this is what it means to live in the house of wisdom, to live in her house. This is how good it can be when you give your life to God's wisdom. And the poet's point couldn't be more clear. You'd have to be a fool. Just a fool not to live in her house. And you have the choice. And she will take care of you. Don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. As we leave this place today, maybe I'll make that decision to go home with Lady Wisdom. With her wisdom in our lives and on our hearts. To let her wisdom be revealed in everything that we do. Maybe live in her house. But if you have not made that decision, to let your life be run by God's wisdom, if you've not given yourself to God, submitted to Him, and trusted Him, just trust Him in what He says. He says do this, you do it. Why don't we do that today? Trust in God's wisdom. Do as it says. Just come as we stand and sing.